Chapter 461, Endless. Su Ming continued dashing forward through that dark path of flesh and blood. The rotten stench in the air was nauseating, and if he breathed in that stench for an extended period of time, he would begin to feel lightheaded. Su Ming bit the tip of his tongue so that he could remain awake. At the same time, he increased his speed. After all, this candle dragon was dead, and it was now a far cry from when it was still alive, which meant that it was far less dangerous than before. However, Su Ming still remained vigilant. If he had not watched his snake being devoured, he would definitely not step foot in a dangerous place like this. As he charged forward, Su Ming could even see rotten corpses around him that had stayed in the dragon for an unknown amount of years. These corpses were the same as this candle dragon. They had not completely decayed, and their horrifying state made all those who saw them to be unable to help themselves but be afraid. From how these corpses were strewn about in the place, it seemed like they had never moved. When Su Ming remembered just how difficult it was to enter this candle dragon, a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. Could it be that once this candle dragon died, no one has been able to get into it? It was quiet all around. Besides Su Ming's footsteps, there were no other sounds, not even wind. No matter how quickly he went, it was still difficult for him to stir up even the faintest wind. This strange condition made Su Ming even more cautious, and because this place was sweltering, he gradually began to sweat. In truth, there was quite a large amount of cold stored in his body because he had stayed in the glacier for a long period of time. Because of this cold, it had been quite a while since Su Ming last sweat. However, in this place, that cold in his body was continuously dispersing, and sweat was also trickling out of his skin. As Su Ming continued onward, besides these rotting corpses, he also saw quite the number of skeletons. Most of these skeletons had already melted away, and what remained in their places were masses of black goo. Judging by their skeletal frames, these skeletons did not belong to people but to ferocious beasts. In fact, Su Ming had even seen some items that looked like enchanted vessels scattered everywhere in the dragon's body. However, since he was in a hurry, he did not have time to inspect them. Nonetheless, he did grab all the enchanted vessels he encountered on the way. Just how long has it been since this candle dragon died? As Su Ming continued charging forward, he kept his mind open to sense his snake's location while beginning to form guesses in his head. As he traveled forth, a sudden sense of danger abruptly rose in his heart. He forced his body to immediately move back a few steps, and almost the instant he began moving back, a bone abruptly shot out from the wall of flesh before him. That bone was entirely grey in color, and once it appeared, it let out a bang that caused the floor made of flesh to surge before that bone turned into a small grey humanoid that was the height of up to Su Ming's knees. The small humanoid was naturally the creature Su Ming had seen outside, the bone fiend that was formed from the candle dragon's bones. The bone fiend opened its mouth towards Su Ming and let out a low growl. Dark light shone in its eyes and it charged at him. At the same time, faces started protruding from the wall of flesh around Su Ming. Those faces all looked incredibly hideous, and once they appeared, they let out piercing screeches, as if they wanted to rush towards Su Ming and devour him. These faces did not belong to humans but to strange-looking ferocious beasts. They were all formed by the candle dragon's flesh and blood, and they were the beasts in the fog Su Ming had seen outside previously. Similarly, sharp spikes started shooting out from the wall of flesh before Su Ming, and they all turned into bone fiends. From further down ahead, wailing sounds started traveling towards him swiftly, and the white vengeful spirits appeared out of thin air. Immediately after, a low murmuring sound faintly came from behind Su Ming, and thousands of feet behind him the giant eyeball gained physical form. The edges of that eyeball were white, and right at the center was a vertical, dark yellow pupil. There seemed to be a crack in the pupil, and that crack was slowly opening up. A strange suction force appeared behind Su Ming, and the mumbling voice seemed to be summoning him. Su Ming's heart lurched, and a false desire of wanting to turn his head back rose in his heart. However, right at that moment, he bit his tongue. His mind immediately snapped awake and he told himself to absolutely not look back. In truth, even if he did not look back, he could still guess that the thing that appeared there was the candle dragon's second eye. As of then, there was no one else in the candle dragon's body, so Su Ming did not have to bother about exposing his identity as a berserker. When those grey humanoids charged towards him, a chilling glare appeared in his eyes. The 4 berserker bones in his body, along with the 5th berserker bone that was transformed due to the Wind Berserker's legacy, let out a mighty power at the same time. That power instantly filled every single spot of Su Ming's body, and the incredible strength in his physical body was something he had been dreaming of for a long time. Ever since he came to the land of the shamans, besides the time when he was at the glacier, he had never executed the full power of the berserkers. Right then, as it burst forth, banging sounds immediately spread through Su Ming's mind. At the same time, his berserker mark, Dark Mountain, appeared on his face. Under his clothes, Dark Mountain Tribe emerged on his chest. The full execution of the power of the berserkers caused his berserker mark to also fully manifest on his body. Get lost! Su Ming roared and clenched his right hand into a fist, then hurled a punch straight at the grey humanoids pouncing on him. The 5 berserker bones on Su Ming's spine shone with a piercing golden light. It spread through his entire body, and if anyone looked at Su Ming's back right then, they would be able to see golden light seeping through his spine. When the power of berserker bones was fully brought out, that power surged through Su Ming's fist and traveled outwards. A loud boom reverberated in the air, and banging sounds rang once again in Su Ming's body. The grey humanoids shuddered and were forced back a few steps before exploding, turning into bones that fell backwards. However, the bones shone with a grey light in midair and turned into the grey humanoids once again to continue lunging forward. Su Ming had suppressed his power of a berserker for a very long time. At that moment, as he let all of it explode from his body and transferred it into his punch, he suddenly had the feeling that this was not all. It was as if he still had energy to spare, and he could bring it all out without a problem. A glint appeared in his eyes. The mumbling sounds behind him were getting closer. He did not have time to think. He took a huge step and rushed forward swiftly. The numerous grey humanoids charged towards him, howling. The large number of white figures closed in, crying out in piercing screeches, and the endless amount of fog beasts that had crawled out of the wall of flesh rushed towards Su Ming from all directions. With a low growl, Su Ming's divine general armor manifested in the form of an illusion. It had been a long time since he brought this armor out. At that moment, the mist from the armor arranged itself into various runes, causing the illusionary armor to obtain a certain level of hardness. At the same time, as Su Ming continued charging forward, his nascent soul opened his eyes in his body and flew straight out of the top of his skull to float above his head. Rivers of light flowed out of the nascent soul's body. When he appeared, he opened his mouth and let out a thunderous cry. The small virescent sword manifested itself and swept horizontally across the area. When Su Ming's nascent soul began forming seals with his hands, he breathed out a breath of nascent soul and pushed it forward swiftly. That breath turned into a fist that rushed outwards. When 2 adversaries meet at a narrow path and cannot back out from a fight, the courageous one will win. Su Ming did not take a single step back. He could not move back. In fact, he had a feeling as if he had returned to the battlefield between the shamans and berserkers once again. While moving forward, he lifted his right hand and drew a line swiftly at the incoming beasts transformed from the candle dragon's carcass. With that one line, the area seemed to have turned silent, and berserker obliteration appeared once again. That one line swept through the area, and rumbling sounds reverberated in the air. The fog beasts in front of Su Ming immediately let out shrill cries of pain before they turned into a large mass of decaying flesh that spilled over the floor. The fog beasts were not powerful. Each of them was just about the level of a medial shaman, but their numbers were endless, and they were continuously springing out of the wall of flesh around Su Ming. The bone fiends were not very strong either. However, they were undying, and even if they crumbled under berserker obliteration's attack, they would soon gather together and reappear. The truly strong ones were the white figures, the crying spirit tears. Each of the spirit tears had the power equivalent to that of a medial shaman who had arrived at the peak. However, compared to the candle dragon's eye behind Su Ming, they were still nothing. After all, the candle dragon was already dead, and only some of its will remained. However, as Su Ming started to attack these creatures, he made a shocking discovery. He found that the creatures were slightly stronger when in the candle dragon's body than in the fog. The white figures had more substance and their cries were shriller. The bone fiends all had a small tail behind them. In fact, there were several of these bone fiends who had longer tails, and they were much stronger than the others. The fog beast claws were much sharper, and their bodies were larger than those Su Ming had met in the fog. The seals are broken. The candle dragon's carcass will start giving birth to these ferocious creatures. You shamans had once broken the seal, then you came to our tribe so that you could work together with us to seal up this place again. But the seals are very fragile. The spirit of Nine Yin's words echoed in Su Ming's head. Suddenly, he understood why the creatures transformed from the candle dragon's carcass were not that powerful. These creatures were just born, that's why they aren't incredibly strong, but as time passes, they will become stronger, and it will happen over a short period of time. When that time comes, they will truly be ferocious beasts born from the candle dragon's carcass. As one of the bone fiends collapsed and gathered together once again, its originally short tail grew much longer, and the bone fiend now had to drag the tail on the ground. It lifted its head and let out a roar. The presence exuded from its body was equivalent to those of the white figures. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The suction force behind him was becoming more distinct. Clearly, that eyeball was rapidly getting closer, and perhaps the eyeball was also rapidly growing as well. Without a hint of hesitation, Su Ming immediately brought out a small bottle from his storage bag. The sea marrow that allowed him to instantly recover his power was contained within it. Once Su Ming drank one drop, the sea marrow turned into a large wave of heat as if it had exploded. Su Ming's eyes sparkled brilliantly. He swiftly rushed forward, executing that extreme speed that allowed him to travel like light itself, the speed from the art he created himself after berserker obliteration. There was no wind in this place, but Su Ming had the provenance of wind in his body, and it was circulating rapidly at the moment, causing his speed to reach the level as when he was outside. He charged forward, and Han Mountain Bell also formed around him. With the sturdiness of the bell and the firmness of divine general armor, Su Ming forced his way through and charged ahead as quickly as he could. Chapter 462, 6th, 7th. The sea marrow exploded in Su Ming's body, turning into a wave of heat that felt like magma wrecking within him. It abruptly burst apart and turned into a great force that surged straight into the 5 berserker bones. Once it was rapidly sucked away by them, what was left swelled outwards. The swelling of that heat was like that of an endless body of water in a long river abruptly turning into several thousands of streams. They filled every single corner of Su Ming's body in an instant, causing him to feel as if there was an unending stream of power at his disposal. The might of the sea marrow caused Su Ming's eyes to sparkle. As he took a step forward, he executed his fastest speed, and when he traveled at that speed, there was no need for him to cast any sort of divine abilities. His divine general armor, Han Mountain Bell, his body, and the small virescent sword before him were his best weapons. He was like the tip of an arrow. He only needed to deliver a strong impact with his speed, and then he could destroy everything in his path. Rumbling sounds reverberated through the air as he ran, and all the bone fiends that tried to block his path were forced back by Su Ming's furious and brute impact. Their bodies shattered, and before they even had time to gather together once again, Su Ming had already passed through them. Even the fog beasts turned into masses of decayed flesh and splattered all over the place as they let out shrill screams of pain. The crying white figures still lunged on Su Ming with their piercing wails. They vanished into smoke amidst the rumbling sounds, and with his extreme speed, Su Ming had already crossed a distance of several thousands of feet in that tunnel within the span of a breath. He had crossed through those thousands of feet with just one breath, and that one breath was all the power contained within the sea marrow in his body. Once he had rushed over that distance, his face turned pale and blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. Han Mountain Bell had shrunk considerably around him, and his divine general armor had shattered numerous times. Clearly, the impact was quite a large burden on him. His nascent soul's eyes were sparkling as he remained above his head and controlled the small virescent sword to slash through the area. The tunnel in front of Su Ming in the candle dragon's body was still filled with dense ferocious beasts packed so close to each other it was impossible to count them. They were being born continuously, manifesting without stop, looking as if there would be no end to them. This sort of feeling was enough to crush a person's mind, and they would begin to feel as if they would never be able to break through no matter how hard they tried. After gasping for a few breaths, Su Ming immediately brought out the small bottle containing the sea marrow and drank another drop without any hesitation. Once that drop entered his mouth, that feeling as if his body was about to explode rose once again. Veins popped out on his face, and there was a feeling in him as if his body was swelling endlessly, but he looked normal on the outside. It was as if that feeling of swelling was just a figment of his imagination. With a low growl, red appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he charged forward swiftly. In the span of a breath, he charged through another few thousands of feet. The ferocious beasts that had tried to block his path were all destroyed. However, once that drop of sea marrow disappeared from Su Ming's body, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Han Mountain Bell shrank back into his body, and Divine General Armor was greatly damaged. Su Ming's face was pale, but his gaze remained steadfast. The more you use these beasts born out of your carcass to try and stop me, the more telling it is that you are afraid. You, who are already dead and only have a shred of your will left, are afraid of my pursuit. If that is the case, then it means that you are currently very weak, so weak that your will might disappear once someone touches it. As Su Ming gasped for breath, he spoke with a grin. He knew that the Candle Dragon's remaining will had heard his words. The ancient voice did not answer him. The only things that appeared were those ferocious beasts, who continuously pounced on Su Ming with increasingly maddening movements. Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. As he moved forward, he brought out the sea marrow once again. This was the third time he drank this liquid in this place. When that feeling as if his body was about to explode rose once more, Su Ming let out a low growl and forced his body to cross another several thousands of feet. As he continued charging forward, banging sounds rang in his body. Those sounds came from above the 5 berserker bones. When they sounded, suddenly, Su Ming's 7th berserker bone started shining with a golden light as well. However, the golden light from the 7th berserker bone was rather faint and could not compare to the other 5. Still, it was indeed shining. The appearance of that light made Su Ming's level of cultivation seem to break through the wall that was those 5 berserker bones, and its power increased by quite a large margin within an instant. A sharp glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Before he drank that sea marrow and called forth all his strength, he could already feel that he could bring out more power. At that time, he had to deal with the endless amount of ferocious beasts and did not have time to ponder about it in his head. As he drank the 3 drops of sea marrow, the feeling as if he could bring out more power only increased. Right then, the continuous accumulation of that feeling that he still had strength remaining in his body caused his 7th berserker bone to shine with golden light, and the appearance of that golden light meant that Su Ming's 7th berserker bone was on the verge of awakening. It was like a sudden explosion of vast power that had accumulated over time. After collecting a large amount of power through a long period of time, Su Ming's level of cultivation had received an explosive burst in the battle with the aid of the pressure in this place and the stimulation provided by the drops of sea marrow. While it still could not compare to his other 5 berserker bones, as the golden light from the 7th berserker bone gradually turned brighter, it looked as if it only needed another push before its full strength would explode forth. Su Ming brought out the small bottle and drank another drop of sea marrow. His eyes were already covered with red and his hair was dancing without wind. Loud rumbling sounds came from within his body, and golden light shot out from his spine with a piercing glare. The sea marrow seemed to be boiling in Su Ming's body. This time, once all of it surged into his berserker bones, it did not spread outwards but was instantly absorbed entirely by the 7th berserker bone. As it absorbed the sea marrow, a large amount of golden light surged forth, causing the 7th berserker bone to look no different from the other 5 within an instant. With 6 berserker bones, Su Ming's power of cultivation instantly increased by a large margin. Veins popped up on his body, and when he let out a low growl, he took a large step forward and hurled his right fist straight in front of him. The 6 berserker bones started operating fully, causing all of Su Ming's power to seem as if it had been focused on his arm. As he hurled his punch forward, a ripple appeared in thin air and spread out rapidly before him. The creatures before him were all thrown back, and many of them exploded. Su Ming panted for breath, then turned into a long arc to charge forward. However, once he crossed several thousands of feet, a large amount of hideous faces belonging to ferocious beasts protruded out of the wall of flesh before him. Fog beasts swiftly appeared, and at the same time, rows upon rows of bone spikes shot through the floor, turning into a large amount of bone fiends. Their numbers were endless. It seemed as if there would never be an end to these creatures, and Su Ming stared at the deeper parts of the tunnel in the Candle Dragon's body. As he looked there, determination appeared on his face. There was one berserker bone protruding off his back under his robes. That berserker bone was usually hidden under his robes and other people could not see it. Only Su Ming could sense it. That bone was located right where his sixth berserker bone should be. At that moment, as Su Ming looked over with his inner vision, he could clearly see that the sixth berserker bone, which was located after the 5 golden berserker bones, was dark and dull. The 7th bone was flashing with golden light, but since the 6th berserker bone was dull, the 7th bone could not connect with the others to become one. Occasionally, a numbness would come from that spot as if there was lightning crawling about in that bone. That berserker bone was naturally the remaining half of the lightning crystal of inheritance that Su Ming had shoved into his bone after cutting through his flesh in the freezing air in the glacier. That day, he had only managed to absorb the wind crystal of inheritance. As for the lightning crystal of inheritance, he had never found a suitable time to refine it. After all, just the wind berserker's legacy alone had already taken up much of his energy. As of then, the wind crystal of inheritance had melted and fused with Su Ming's 5th berserker bone to become one. Su Ming had originally decided to clear his mind and slowly refine the lightning crystal of inheritance, but the crisis of an endless amount of ferocious beasts in the candle dragon's body loomed right above his head. Right at that moment, Su Ming gritted his teeth. The instant the ferocious beasts that just appeared lunged at him, he lifted his right hand and slammed it right on the protruding 6th berserker bone. Intense pain shot through his entire body. At the same time, the remaining half of the lightning crystal of inheritance hidden under his flesh and in his 6th berserker bone instantly stabbed into his spine. A strong surge of lightning exploded abruptly in Su Ming's spine. That lightning charged downwards and connected with his feet. Rumbling sounds echoed in the air, and a large amount of lightning sparks appeared out of thin air around Su Ming. Soon after, his origin berserker vessel which he had created when he awakened woke up and caused the lightning in the world to instantly go into a frenzy. They charged straight towards Su Ming's 6th berserker bone and fused with it in the blink of an eye. Sharp pain spread through Su Ming's entire body, causing his pain to twist from it. With that extreme method, the lightning crystal of inheritance forcefully fused with his berserker bone when he let out a roar. As lightning sparkled and thunder rumbled, as the 6th berserker bone gradually started shining with a golden light, the 7th berserker bone connected with the other berserker bones on Su Ming's spine, causing him to swiftly lift his head and abruptly charge forward. Outside the world of 9 Yin, in the outer region of the land of the shamans, was a vast expanse of black sea. Far into the distance of that sea was a gigantic continent whose end could not be seen, and it was traveling forth at an extreme speed towards the land of South Morning. The waves that were formed due to the movement of the continent surged wildly, and they moved so quickly that they were letting out continuous loud bangs that spread in all directions. On that continent was a mountain, and there were always 9 bolts of lightning raining down from the sky all year round, causing the mountain to always be surrounded by endless bolts of lightning. There was an old crimson-haired man sitting cross-legged on that mountain. He had a hawkish nose and his expression was dark. Almost the instant Su Ming forcefully fused with that lightning crystal of inheritance, the old man opened his eyes, and his gaze was sinister. There was a monstrous murderous intent and anger burning in his eyes, along with a hint of wariness. He was naturally Kai Lei Qian from the Eastern Wastelands, the true scion of the lightning berserker. However, there was only half of the lightning crystal of inheritance remaining in his body. The other half was the source of his anger and madness. Chapter 463. One sentence. In the world of 9 Yin, as Su Ming remained in the candle dragon's carcass, lightning swam through his entire body. The power from the 7 berserker bones burst forth fully, causing him to become even faster and his power of cultivation to also increase by a large margin. When he crossed another several thousands of feet, he drank the 4th drop of sea marrow. He originally did not have that many drops, but when he was in Shaman City, he had discovered them on sale while on his shopping spree for medicinal herbs. Although there were not many on sale, he still bought them with some shaman crystals. By doing so, he managed to charge through around 7,000 feet without a single stop. Carnage rained down behind him, and there was only a wreckage remaining where he passed through. Yet he also had to pay a heavy price. The pouring of blood from his mouth, the shattering of his divine general armor, the return of Han Mountain Bell into his body, and the tumbling of his chi all over his body caused Su Ming's face to turn pale, but he did not stop. Instead, Once the power of the drop of sea marrow disappeared, his nascent soul let out a piercing howl. Light began flashing on his nascent soul's body as he howled. Once that light enveloped Su Ming's entire body, he took a swift charge forward, and they both immediately disappeared. His nascent soul had warped, bringing Su Ming with him to appear at a spot nearly 1,000 feet away from where they originally were. When they reappeared, the nascent soul let out another piercing howl, and they warped again. They did this 7 times, causing Su Ming to cross another 7,000-something feet in the tunnel. There were no longer any ferocious beasts being born from the candle dragon, but there was an endless supply of those creatures behind him, and they were all charging towards him. Su Ming was gasping for breath. His nascent soul had already become quite dull and had returned to his Dantian region. Su Ming gritted his teeth and charged forward, drawing out a long arc with his movements. His speed as he traveled through the candle dragon became increasingly faster, and after a moment, the roars from the ferocious beasts behind him grew faint. Clearly, Su Ming had widened the distance between them quite considerably. However, he did not let down his guard, because that suction force behind him did not disappear, but had instead become much stronger. Mumbling echoed beside his ears, and the words within it baited Su Ming time and again, making him want to turn his head back to look. However, the words from the spirit of Nine Yin remained as a constant reminder to him. He was to not look into the candle dragon's eye no matter what. Su Ming did not turn his head back. He only continued charging forth, even drinking 1 drop of sea marrow on the way, causing his power to instantly recover. His speed had also arrived at a state where it could not be described with words. As he continuously charged into the deeper parts of the candle dragon's carcass and got closer to its head, gradually, the heat around Su Ming reached its most intense state. Even the act of breathing itself sent waves of burning and painful heat in his body. Even the walls of flesh around him had turned a crimson red. There was also a large amount of liquid dripping down the walls of flesh. When it trailed down and fell on the floor, sizzling sounds could be heard. The liquid clearly contained powerful corrosive properties. The heat and the suffocating sensation that made Su Ming feel as if he could not breathe quickened his breathing and filled his heart with irritation. A large amount of sweat seeped out of Su Ming's body, and it instantly turned into steam the moment it appeared, causing Su Ming to look as if he was surrounded by a white, misty layer of fog as he pressed onward. If anyone else was in his place, perhaps they would have found this situation difficult to bear. This had very little to do with the power of cultivation and was more related to an individual's ability to resist heat. Although it was difficult for Su Ming to bear through the heat, he continued maintaining that extreme speed, because this was not the first time he had such an experience. When he was still a teenager, this sort of earth and fire had already been lying part of the cave abode he had made for himself. In fact, he had even gone into the deeper parts of the cave and seen the wings of the moon along with the rolling magma. He had even practiced the fire berserker's art and had in fact never given up on practicing the fire berserker's moon-worshipping art. That in itself was already enough to let Su Ming's control over fire be much stronger compared to other people. That was why he could charge forth like the wind without slowing down even the slightest bit in the candle dragon's body despite the heat. Time trickled by. He did not know how long it had been, but in Su Ming's mind, his connection with the small snake always remained. He could sense that the small snake was flying forward in the distance. He had called to it many times, but the small snake always ignored him. However, Su Ming could sense through the connection he had with the small snake that there was an unfamiliar power in the snake's body controlling its mind. With that connection, Su Ming never stopped moving and continued chasing after the snake until he reached an area that even he found difficult to beat. That was an area that covered 10,000 feet, and it was a place that seemed to be able to burn everything into ashes. The instant he stepped into that area, pain shot through Su Ming's entire body, and it was a pain brought only by burns. He saw a green light shining within that region. The ground was covered in a layer of green-like substance that made it seem like a swamp. That area was empty. There was not even a single skeleton around that spot. The scorching heat came from that green swamp. Su Ming only took a few steps forward before a feeling that his whole entire body was about to be burned to ashes rose strongly in him. If he did not take any preventive measures and just walked into the area like this, he believed that his feet would burn up before he could even take 3 steps forward, and when that time came, only death would await him. However, he did not have time to think too deeply into this. The suction force and the mumbling sounds behind him were becoming stronger, causing him to be unable to stop and think of a foolproof plan. During this moment of crisis, Su Ming lifted his right hand swiftly, bit the tip of his finger, then immediately swiped his finger across his eyes. The instant he smeared his blood on his eyes, the fire berserker's art activated in his body. The moon could not be seen in this place, but the instant Su Ming wiped his blood on his eyes, his blood started feeling as if it was burning up, causing him to perform the burning of blood. The instant Su Ming's blood started burning, the heat in the area instantly felt weaker. He did not hesitate any longer. He charged forward, turning into a long arc. 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. When he flew 6,000 feet, sharp pain abruptly shot up his legs, bringing a great burning sensation. As his legs burned, the flames enveloped his entire body. At that time, Su Ming had already covered a distance of 8,000 feet. When those flames covered his entire torso and charged straight to his head, he had already covered a distance of 9,000 feet. He lifted his burning right hand and performed the burning of blood once again. With a hoarse roar, Su Ming flew past those 10,000 feet in an instant to appear on the other side of the green swamp in the Candle Dragon's body. When he arrived there and was just about to charge forward as per usual, cracking sounds abruptly sprang forth from his legs. Layers of ice covered his entire body, and the process only lasted for an instant before he turned into an ice statue. Su Ming's frozen body remained in his previous act of taking a step forward, and at that moment, he was standing on the spot, unmoving. After going through the heated tunnel in the Candle Dragon's corpse, an icy stage appeared before him, and Su Ming, who had run head first into this freezing chill, turned into an ice sculpture. After 3 breaths, a spark of fire suddenly appeared in Su Ming's eyes where he was sealed in that ice. At the same time, lightning sparks spread through the layer of ice from his spine. Soon after, a whirlwind spread out from within his body with a bang, and as cracking reverberated in the air, that ice instantly shattered to pieces. Su Ming walked out of the ice, and freezing wind came crashing into his face, seeping into his body. Immediately, just like the heat from before, sharp pain spread through his entire body with each breath he took. However, compared to this pain, the suction force that remained as a constant behind him, along with the roars and howls that had begun echoing beside his ears once again, were what bothered Su Ming the most. He did think about setting up some traps to block those creatures before, but it was already difficult enough to set traps or runes in this place, and that was not counting the fact that these creatures could come and go as they pleased since they were born from the carcass. Su Ming had even seen the fog beasts moving through the Candle Dragon's flesh. The bone fiends also moved deep under the floor in the form of bones, and it was difficult for him to stop them. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he dashed forward, once again executing that extreme speed of his face with the freezing wind blowing against him. He did not know just how far he had traveled, neither did he know where exactly he was in the Candle Dragon's body. His path and his actions were all made after he sensed in his heart where the small snake was flying. As he moved forward, Su Ming suddenly stopped, and the thing that brought this about was a frozen body stuck to the cold wall of flesh to his right. It was a dried-up corpse whose appearance could no longer be seen. However, he was wearing a purple armor, and it was shining with a purple light. The glowing armor was incredibly eye-catching. There were deep scars on the walls of flesh around that corpse. Judging by the scars, it could be seen that this person had actually managed to harm the Candle Dragon before his death. There was one scar that looked as if a chunk of flesh had been ripped off, and it was a terrifying sight to behold, but that was not all. Su Ming would not have stopped if that had just been the case. The one true reason that made him pause in his charge was because the armor's appearance and presence gave him an incredible sense of familiarity at that instant. That familiarity was not because he had seen this person before, but because that armor was practically the same as his berserker armor, besides the color. Su Ming's armor was an illusion, and he had to get the true berserker armor from the Great Yu dynasty. It was unknown as to whether the Great Yu dynasty truly existed, but the armor before Su Ming's eyes right at that moment told him that the country truly existed. The instant Su Ming saw the armor, his heart pounded against his chest. This was the first item that actually managed to tempt him ever since he arrived inside the Candle Dragon's body. Right at that moment, the suction force and the mumbling sounds behind him grew stronger. The roars and howls followed swiftly, and bumps even popped out of the walls around and ahead of him before they started squirming about. Clearly, The ferocious beasts had caught up to him. Su Ming did not hesitate. He took a step forward, arrived beside the skeleton, and seized the purple armor. Yet the instant his hand touched the armor, the skeleton that Su Ming had deemed dead suddenly lifted his right hand and grabbed his wrist. At the same time, within the skeleton's eyes in his dried-up head, a faint, dark light flickered. I found the third. It was also right at that moment that an accident happened. Su Ming's connection with the small snake broke. At the same time, the eyes of the person in black robes who had followed Su Ming all the way into the fog surrounding the candle dragon's carcass began flashing as he sat at a corner in the fog, looking as if he was hesitating and uncertain about something. Yet after a moment, he lifted his right hand and flipped it over, and a green jade slip appeared in his hand. Master made this personally, and this is the last destiny talisman I have. The old man gritted his teeth and pressed the green jade slip to the center of his brows. Almost the instant he pressed the jade slip to the center of his brows, his body began trembling furiously. Fog filled the insides of his eyes, and gradually, a picture appeared within his pupils. The person in the picture was Su Ming, who was inside the candle dragon's body. Chapter 464, Candle Dragon, Nine-Headed Dragon. Su Ming's heart trembled. He had used his divine sense to check the skeleton and used his eyes to verify that it had been dead for many years. His body had also completely dried up. When his wrist was grabbed by the skeleton, a huge storm stirred up in his heart, and as he stood there completely stunned, he almost forgot about the ferocious beasts that were charging towards him with those incessant roars. This sudden accident that happened completely out of his expectations made Su Ming's pupils shrink. I found the third, his eternal. A faint, dark light glowed in the skeleton's eyes, but before he could even finish speaking his sentence, that light immediately became dull and disappeared. The dried-up hand that held onto Su Ming's wrist also fell to the floor. Su Ming was shocked to the core, but he did not have time to think. He grabbed the skeleton's armor, and once he did so, a transparent jade slip about the size of his palm slipped off from under the armor covering the skeleton. Due to its transparency, it was difficult for anyone to discover it. Su Ming had also only taken notice of it when he tore that purple armor off the skeleton. Without a hint of hesitation, he swept that transparent jade slip towards himself with a sweep of his arm, then immediately charged forward into the distance the instant the squirming creatures from the walls around him started crawling out. The moment he left, the bumps in the walls around him burst open, and fog beasts that were now obviously slightly different from those Su Ming had seen previously rushed out with unending roars. These creatures looked like pythons, but also had indistinct human faces where their heads should be. Forked tongues protruded out of their mouths as they hissed, and there was an eerie light in their eyes. Once they slammed their tails on the floor, they immediately charged towards Su Ming. At the same time, the bone spikes shot through the floor and exploded, turning into small grey humanoids with long tails. Besides the cracks where their eyes and mouth should be, there was another crack at the top of their heads. That particular crack had now been ripped wide apart, making it seem as if there was a strange thing stored inside the heads and it was trying to crawl out from their skulls. Apart from the fog beasts and bone fiends, the white figures that were floating forward while crying were also different. Their facial features were originally hidden under their hair and were rather indistinct, but as they lifted their heads, absolutely gorgeous faces could be seen, and their grace was especially breathtaking. It was enough to make a person who saw them be completely infatuated with their looks. Su Ming could see none of it. He simply continued speeding forward at his absolute fastest speed. He had already lost his connection with the small snake and was feeling extremely anxious, but he could still sense the final spot where his snake was before the connection broke. A long time passed as he continued charging forward, and the tunnel before him abruptly expanded. Then, a gigantic hole of flesh and blood so great that it was like a field appeared right before Su Ming. This was the spot where his connection broke with his snake. The instant Su Ming arrived at this spot, he saw a bizarre object that looked like the crown of a tree, and it was formed by several thick black tendons intertwining with each other right at the center of the gigantic hole. At the top of those black tendons was a mass of dried-up flesh nearly 10,000 feet big. That mass of flesh was filled with bumps, and it was in a dark grayish color. There was also several spots on that mass of flesh that had drooped down. Su Ming saw nearly 100 glittering crystal fragments floating above that mass of flesh. The sizes of those crystal fragments differed, but each and every one of them exuded a presence that made him feel as if his mind was about to be sucked into them. It was as if there was a world contained within each of those crystal fragments. There was a total of 97 of those crystal fragments. They floated near that mass of flesh, and if Su Ming took a closer look, he would see that there were black threads connecting those fragments to that mass of flesh. Almost the instant Su Ming arrived at the place, the humongous mass of flesh shrank before instantly swelling up slightly, and the spot where it swelled up was turned straight towards Su Ming. A crack slowly opened up on that mass of flesh, and as that crack was continuously ripped apart, Su Ming saw a head within its deeper parts. It was a woman's head. She had long, lustrous hair, but there were black tendons covering her neck. At that moment, the woman had her eyes closed and her face was pale. There was not a hint of life within her. At the center of her brows was a flashing mark, and the shape of the mark looked like a star. Su Ming's snake floated silently beside the woman's head. It did not seem to be struggling, just in a daze. There were wisps of white smoke spreading out from its body, crawling straight into the mark at the center of the woman's brows. This is the fate of all the descendants of the Candle Dragon. You cannot stop it. The instant Su Ming saw the small snake, the ancient voice that he once heard echoed by his ears once again. When he first heard it, he had been unable to discern whether the voice belonged to a male or a female, but at that moment Su Ming could sense that it was an old voice clearly belonging to a woman. It only has a hint of the Candle Dragon's blood within it, but as long as it has that blood, then it is a part of our race. This is fate. The Candle Dragons are destined to devour each other. This is its predetermined fate after running into me in my current state. Before it lost its will, its only hope was for its master to leave this place safely. You are its master. As long as you do not anger me during the sacred ritual of my race, then after I complete the ritual, I will let you leave safely. There was a wave of mercilessness in that ancient voice as it echoed in Su Ming's head. Su Ming looked at the small snake, looked at its closed eyes, looked at its unmoving body, and he clenched his right fist. His divine general armor appeared once again, and his right hand was no longer in the form of a fist, but was already holding onto the spiked club that had materialized in his right hand. His berserker mark flickered on his face and his 7 berserker bones shone with a piercing golden light in his body, causing Su Ming to look as if he was surrounded by golden light. At the same time, his nascent soul began forming seals with both hands. Even though it did not appear outside his body, it was already ready for a fight in his Dantian region. The small virescent sword flashed before Su Ming. As green light filled its entire body, Su Ming took a step forward without wasting a single breath of his on meaningless words and charged straight towards the giant mass of flesh. I might only have a shred of my will left, but how dare an ant like you provoke me? Flesh and blood within the fog, form your body with my will. As that ancient voice echoed in the air calmly, the fog beasts with the appearances of pythons among the endless amount of ferocious beasts that were giving chase roared and exploded in an instant. Once an unknown number of those creatures exploded, their bodies turned into pieces of rotten flesh and appeared right before Su Ming out of nowhere while he rushed forward. As those pieces of flesh gathered together, they turned into a gigantic body that was 10,000 feet tall in front of Su Ming. The body reminded of a snake but had the head of a dragon. It was entirely crimson, and it looked savage. Its eyes were gray, and each of its scales were about the size of an adult's head. An indescribable presence spread forth from the odd creature's body. Murderous spirits in my bones, turn into bones and veins with my will. The ancient voice spoke once again. This time, the bone fiends behind Su Ming turned into sharp spikes and charged towards the gigantic body. Once they impaled it, the odd dragon and snake hybrid started moving, and the gray light in its eyes became stronger. Spirits formed from my soul, merged together into a single soul with my will. The instant the ancient voice said those words, the white figures behind Su Ming fused together as they cried shrilly and charged towards that dragon and snake hybrid. When they disappeared into its body, the dragon snake's eyes suddenly shone brilliantly like the sun and moon. It lifted its head and let out a roar. The gray light in its eyes flickered, and it looked as if it had been revived as it charged towards Su Ming with a howl. Su Ming swung the spiked club in his right outward, and it grew several times in size before ramming straight into the dragon snake's body. At the same time, Su Ming drew one line with his left hand, executing berserker obliteration. Immediately after, his nascent soul let out a piercing howl in his body. A large amount of ripples appeared around him. At that instant, all the divine abilities that he could cast from the array of skills he inherited from Hong Luo were executed by his nascent soul. A violent bang reverberated in the area and spread in all directions. Once that bang faded away, Su Ming's spiked club was bounced off and fell to the side. The divine abilities his nascent soul cast shattered, causing his nascent soul to instantaneously become so limp that he looked as if he was about to scatter away. The divine general armor exploded, and his berserker obliteration did nothing. Everything that he had was completely useless before this dragon snake. As that dragon snake closed in on him, Su Ming coughed out blood, and as that bang reverberated in the air, his body was forced back around 100 feet, but there was not a hint of panic in his eyes. As expected, you're indeed incredibly weakened. No matter how much will you have left remaining, you can't hide just how terrified you are. As a cold sneer appeared on Su Ming's lips, he lifted his right hand, formed a seal, then pointed in the direction before him. Immediately, his Han Mountain Bell manifested before him. This time, Su Ming did not intend to use Han Mountain Bell for defense but summoned it to cast its strongest power, the Sixth Head's ability. If Su Ming had not seen the white figures screeching and retreating when he summoned the nine-headed dragon when he was outside, if he had not brought out the nine-headed dragon before his small snake in the past and seen the small snake showing a guarded expression, then howling at it as if having run into its mortal enemy, it might not have left such a deep impression on his mind. If these things had not happened, then he would be uncertain as to how he should fight against this dead candle dragon's will even after he had entered its body. But that would only happen if those things had not occurred. Nine-headed dragon, Southern Emperor, absolute. Once Su Ming's Han Mountain Bell appeared and he finished forming those seals, he pointed forward. As Su Ming muttered the string of words without even wiping away the blood at the corners of his lips, Han Mountain Bell abruptly let out an intense howl. The instant the howl reverberated through the air, a guarded expression immediately appeared on the dragon snake's face, and it even started roaring. Its current look was the exact same as the small snake's in the past, as if it had run into its greatest enemy. When I used this thing outside, you should have sensed it. You did everything that you could to stop me, even trying to kill me when I entered your dead body, because of your weakness. Perhaps I cannot fight against you, but I have here with me a creature that can frighten you. This is that creature. As Su Ming said those words, the roars within Han Mountain Bell grew stronger. At the same time, a nine-headed gigantic beast of 10,000 feet manifested above Han Mountain Bell. 6 of its heads roared at the dragon snake at the same time, and the remaining 3 heads that were still sleeping started vibrating. It did not matter whether it was the nine-headed dragon's expression or its gaze, there was also a sort of guardedness and hate within them, as if the candle dragon was also its mortal enemy. Candle dragon. Nine-headed dragon. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Chapter 465. Sky and Earth, Ice and Fire. Nine-headed dragon. The ancient voice said in a low voice, its words reverberating in the air. I have always wanted to ask the Lord of all heavens why the earth must exist after the world has a sky. Why is it that when the world has fire, ice must appear? I also wanted to ask the heavens why the nine-headed dragons were born, even after there's already us candle dragons. I spent my entire life searching, but I couldn't find an answer. When ice and fire blend together, what appears is boiling water, frozen fire, and a presence that is completely different from ice and fire. When the sky and earth fuse together, what appears is a grey piece of sky, a broken void, and the power of one world. Then, what appears after the candle dragons and nine-headed dragons fuse together? What is it? What is it? What is it? At the end, the voice had practically slipped off the edge, and her roars resounded in the area. The dragon snake roared at the same time as well. With a savage expression and madness, it charged towards the nine-headed dragon. Su Ming's nine-headed dragon also roared, and without Su Ming even needing to control it, all 6 of the heads rushed towards the dragon snake. Booming sounds reverberated in all directions. The candle dragon was already dead, and this dragon snake was put together with great difficulty by its remaining will. The difference between this candle dragon and its original body was like heaven and earth. Yet similarly, Su Ming's 9-headed dragon did not have a physical body, only a spirit one. It was Han Mountain Bell's vessel spirit, and it had been asleep for many years. It also only had 6 awakened heads. That was why its strength was largely different from when it was alive. As such, the candle dragon and Su Ming's 9-headed dragon were an equal match for each other. These two powerful beasts that considered each other as their mortal enemy started fighting against madly. Su Ming stood there with a hint of confusion in his eyes for an instant. The source of his confusion were the words that the ancient voice had uttered just now. Those words echoed in his head, making him feel as if he had understood something, but when he thought about it carefully, he found that he had gained nothing from it. The fusion between ice and fire. The fusion between sky and earth. This sort of feeling was just like the one from when he sat on the platform outside his cave abode on the 9th summit after speaking to Xianxia. Understanding those words had taken him several months, but in the end, he had obtained his own creation through an epiphany. He came to understand his very own method to clear his mind, and the exact same process of confusion followed by understanding had appeared when he drew that one line and executed his first berserker obliteration. As of then, the confusion in Su Ming's eyes grew stronger. The words from the ancient voice echoed incessantly in his head. Su Ming had a strong hunch that if he understood those words completely, then, he would hold control over an unimaginable power. However, at that moment, he could only bite down on his tongue and snap himself out of it. This epiphany might be precious, but the timing was absolutely not suitable. If he continued mulling over it, then he would die. He could not think of anything else that would come out of it. That was why, even though he felt that it was a pity, Su Ming had to force himself to instantly snap awake before he completely immersed himself in those words. As he regained his senses, a shocking boom traveled into his ears. The dragon snake and 9-headed dragon were fighting against each other in midair, and the fight between these two enemies had reached its most intense state. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he swiftly turned into a long arc. When he took a step forward, he circled around the fighting pair to charge straight towards the giant mass of flesh floating in midair. The beautiful woman's face in that mass of flesh did not change. Fine white threads of mist were still continuously seeping out of the small snake before her and being absorbed by the mark at the center of the woman's brows. Killing intent flashed in Su Ming's eyes. He took a step forward, and the instant he closed in on that mass of flesh, it started squirming viciously. At the same time, that ancient voice traveled forth gently. I will grant you a long life. I will let you be the same as me, that even when the sky and earth crumbles, you will not be destroyed, that even when the heavens fall to ruin, you will not die. Do you want that? I will grant you endless power. I will let your body be almost the same as mine. I can let you break the rules of the world and step into the endless emptiness so that you can see a bigger world and see the stars in the sky. Do you want that? I can even grant eternity for your soul so that you can be the brightest star under heaven. I can let all those who see you with their eyes bow down and worship you. Do you want that? I can grant you control over the power of one world. I can let you become a powerful warrior so you will be able to do whatever it is you want. Do you want that? I can grant you the power to tear through all mysteries. I can let you understand what is up ahead, above the blue sky. I can let you see what is under the ground. I can let you hold control over your own life with your own hands, and no one will be able to control it. Do you want that? When that ancient voice spoke, Su Ming's footsteps froze for a moment when he heard those words. You must have dreams, desires. I can help you fulfill all your wishes and let you obtain the power to fulfill those dreams and desires. You can find your dreams. You can tear away the sky that covers your eyes. You can control your own fate. You can crush all your enemies before you. I can do it. Trust me. I can really do it. I am the Candle Dragon. I am the strongest of all candle dragons. When I was alive, I could make darkness fall on 100 worlds in an instant. I had devoured more than 100 million souls. As long as I wake up, as long as I am resurrected, I can swear on my race's oath, I will definitely do all that I have just said. As long as you don't interrupt my race's ritual. As long as you back down now and not come closer. If you agree to this, then I will fulfill my oath. A boom went off in Su Ming's head. His breathing quickened as he stared fixedly at the woman's face. The sincerity in her words could not be doubted. He did not care for eternal life, neither did he care about having an everlasting spirit. But he did care about what lay above the blue sky. He cared about having control over his own fate. He cared about tearing apart the mist that covered his eyes. He cared about searching for Dark Mountain, cared about understanding the true source behind destiny. All of these were the things he desired, were things he yearned for so greatly that he almost dreamed about them in his sleep. If you don't believe me, then I can acknowledge you as my master, but the process is separated into two parts. The first part is just the initial state. If we go according to what we promised, then once I'm resurrected, we can complete the second step. I will definitely fulfill all that I have promised. You will only lose a snake that is only an infant, and one that doesn't have a pure bloodline to boot, but in its place will be me. Su Ming fell silent, and after a long while, he shook his head. I don't trust you. The instant he said those words, he charged towards the woman's head in that mass of flesh. Why don't you trust me? All that I have said is the truth. As long as I am resurrected, I will definitely do it. You are not the first person to whom I have made an oath. There was someone before you who received my oath. I don't remember his name, but the feeling of his blood is similar to yours. He called himself the third god of berserkers. Right at that moment, within the endless fog surrounding the candle dragon's gigantic carcass, the old man in black robes had already used his final destiny talisman as he sat in that fog. The scenes flashing in his eyes were the things that were happening to Su Ming right at that moment. With a special method, this old man in black robes had seen everything that happened after Su Ming entered the candle dragon's body. A glint appeared in his eyes, and a strange smile suddenly formed on his lips. The remaining will of the candle dragon might be strong, but it now has to devour its descendant and face destiny. Perhaps I can use it. The old man's smile grew brighter. Destiny has that crimson dragon and the old spirit of 9 yin. It's difficult for me to restore order and let him continue walking down his predestined path. Only when he is in the candle dragon's body can I avoid the crimson dragon. But I, too, can't enter its body. I can only use the destiny talisman to see him. The old man licked his lips, and Su Ming's inverted figure in his pupils twisted. But if I offer my power to the destiny talisman, then I can cast some divine abilities. These divine abilities might not be able to fulfill my initial plans to make destiny fall asleep once again, but I can use them to stir up the candle dragon's will and have it open up the undying and imperishable world so that it will turn into a cage to trap destiny. He will be forcefully made to stay there, and I will achieve the same result as in my initial plan. I will also have enough time to wait for Master's second projection. If everything goes according to plan, then I will have obtained a huge achievement. As the old man in black robes smiled, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the green jade slip at the center of his brows. It vibrated, and a black ball of thread seeped out from its edges. Those black threads were spreading quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they covered his entire face. There were especially a lot of those black threads by the corners of his eyes. They even seeped into the old man's eyes as they continued stretching outwards. They replaced the blood capillaries in his eyes, and when they turned into black threads, they covered his pupils. Su Ming's inverted figure in them also became much fainter. At the same time, the green hue on the jade slip rapidly faded away and became dull. Once it turned black, it exploded with a bang. But the instant it was reduced to powder, the old man in black robes opened his mouth and let out a puff of air. Once that breath escaped his mouth, it turned into black fog and disappeared into nothingness. Over at Su Ming's side, the instant he heard the candle dragon mentioning the third god of berserkers, his heart was shaken, but still, he did not stop. He charged deep into the mass of flesh, clenched his right fist and had the 7 berserker bones in his body burst forth with incredibly power. Right then, just as he was about to ram his fist into the woman's head that was absorbing those white threads from the small snake's body right at that moment, a gust of wind appeared out of nowhere at the edge of that giant mass of flesh, at a spot where Su Ming could not see. A layer of black fog appeared along with that wind and drifted lightly into the giant mass of flesh, disappearing into it. All of this happened in an instant, and in the blink of an eye, it ended.